Chapter 2. A Common Enemy. My cell buzzes. A text from Aubrey? No, it's Jack. I'd forgotten we'd exchanged numbers. Topic? I thought of dozens of topics, but I don't want to be pushy, don't want to be that girl. The one who tries to run the whole show. Jack's the first kid at MIMS who didn't look at me as if I were something he'd scraped off his shoe. I needed to take it slow, so I didn't scare him off. I almost text Aubrey to ask her advice on this. Almost. I'm still stinging a little from her last text, though now I'm wondering if I read too much into it. My cell buzzes again, shaking me from my thoughts. You there? I pick up my cell and tap a reply. Loads of ideas. Talk tomorrow? Tomorrow. But when I see Jack in science the next afternoon, he acts like I have the plague. I walk into class and head straight to Jack's pod, where, by the way, there are 2 empty seats. I put my book bag on the black-topped table and walk around to one of the empty chairs. A boy sitting at the next pod over snickers and points at us. Jack hears him and then mutters, "These seats are taken." And here I go, back to square one. I move to my usual pod at the rear of the classroom. Even though it seats 4, I'm the only one who ever sits here. When I came to MIMS, I upset the delicate balance of this even-numbered science class. They had to add this pod to accommodate the new kid. I stare at the lacy curtains covering the coat room and begin plotting, as I always do, about how I might lean out just far enough so I could slide right into the closet. I'd hide there and wait until class ends. Ms. Phillips grabs my attention when she sets a plastic tray holding lab materials in the center of my pod. The upside to this seating arrangement: I always get my own stuff and I get to do all the experiments by myself. I like this because I can take my time, take notes and draw sketches without an impatient lab partner telling me to hurry it up. I was able to get these soil labs through a gift from City Council, says Miss Phillips. She always shares these details like she's on some promotional tour that no one would ever go see. Oops, I'll be right back, she says to the class. I forgot to get the pipettes. Ms. Phillips gives us the stare. I feel certain it's a skill all teachers possess, the ability to issue a warning without saying one word. The stare tells us that under no uncertain terms, we had all better behave while she's out of the room, or else. I pick up my lab sheet and read it over. This lab will measure the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium levels of the soil sample Ms. Phillips had placed on our trays. I look at the samples on everyone else's tables and notice each sample looks different. Ms. Phillips must have planned this so we would all get different results. My tray is loaded with vials and aluminum packets containing various tablets. One is labeled extraction, and I will need to use this tablet to break down the chemical properties of the soil sample. I open the largest vial, drop in the extraction tablet, and use a 10 milliliter graduated cylinder to pour water into the vial until it reaches the line indicated near the top. I snap the lid on tightly and start shaking. It seems to take 10 to forevers, but eventually the tablets dissolve. I scoop a teaspoon of soil from the soil sample bag and add it to the vial. I recap it and begin shaking it again. And then, more shaking. The instructions say to leave the tube upright for several minutes to allow the soil to settle at the bottom of the vial. I look around the room and see almost everyone else is at the same point in the experiment as I am. The soil takes longer than I expect to settle out. I can't go forward until enough clear liquid rises above the soil in the extraction vial. I need to add that liquid to the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium test vials to complete the soil tests. I glance at the clock and realize I'd better set up the test vials or I won't have time to finish the experiment before class ends. I open the 3 slender vials and drop the appropriate test tablets into each. I pull a piece of notebook paper out and draw a rectangle with 3 sections, labeling one section for each of the 3 tests. It's a trick I learned in science last year. That way, I can set up 3 tests at once and not have to remember which one is which. Nerd! Ms. Phillips returns to the classroom and calls us up to get pipettes to use to transfer the liquid from the extraction vial to the test vials. I wait in line with the other kids until at last I get my pipette and head back to my table. All of my soil has settled to the bottom of the extraction vial, so I finish setting up the lab. I carefully remove the lid from the extraction vial as to not disturb the soil. If that happened, I'd have to wait again for it to settle out, and I'd be as old as Miss Phillips by then. Maybe older. Crap, says a boy with a faded t-shirt, shattering my concentration. Looking over, I see he has spilled the contents of his extraction vial. He scrambles to start the test again, and then it seems as if there's a domino effect. A red-haired girl at the pod beside mine is expressing her displeasure over her friend knocking over one of their test vials. She carries the vial to a large plastic bucket in the sink, empties it, and returns to her desk with a scowl on her face. "It's okay, Becca," says another girl at their pod. "We've got enough clear liquid to set it up again." When a boy on the other side of the room knocks over his graduated cylinder, I remind myself to slow down. I take a deep breath and hold it while I use the pipette to transfer the liquid from the extraction vial to the nitrogen test vial. I repeat the procedure with the phosphorus and potassium test vials, capping each vial as I go, hoping to avoid my own spills. I shake the vials until the tablet in each one dissolves, and then I set the timer, feeling certain I'll have enough time to complete the lab sheet by the end of class. I'm sketching the vials and answering questions on the lab sheet when I notice none of my test vials yield a color change. One at a time, I pick up each vial and shake it, confirming the tablets have dissolved. I put the vials back onto their appropriate section of the notebook paper and give it a few more minutes. "Cool," says the boy who had spilled his extraction vial. He holds up one of the test vials, showing his partner the pinkish water indicating the presence of nitrogen in their soil. I look back at my samples. Mine should have all turned colors by now. I pick one up and look more closely, and I see the water is so clear it could be plain tap water. In fact, all 3 of the test tubes look like tap water. I wonder if my test tablets have expired. I grab my extraction tube, hoping I have enough clear solution to repeat at least one of the tests. That's when Chloe starts laughing. She points to my table, then whispers to her lab partner, Abigail Barnes, a girl with a pointy face and a nose that begs to butt in. When Chloe holds up one of the test vials at their table, I realize she must have sabotaged my lab. Looking more closely at my materials, I know Chloe must have switched my test tablets with extraction tablets while I was getting my pipette. My test vials look clear because there was nothing inside of them for the extraction tablets to break down. "Be sure you place the vial against the appropriate rectangle in the indicator card and hold both to the light to take your readings," says Ms. Phillips. "Don't forget to fill in all sections of your lab sheet or you will lose points on your grade." Ms. Phillips's instructions bring more laughter from Chloe. Disgusted, I begin cleaning my area, knowing there is simply not enough time for me to repeat the experiment. I eye the stack of assignments in the extra credit bin and wonder how many of them I'll have to do to make up for the poor grade I'm sure to receive on this lab. "Way to go, IntelliGrace," says Chloe as she passes by my pod on her way to dump her vials into the plastic bucket. "That's enough," Jack says in a low voice to Chloe. Chloe jerks her head in his direction. "What's it to you?" "Chloe, just for the fun of it, would you try to be a little more human?" asks Jack. He motions me over to his pod, where one empty seat remains. Even though I still think he acted like a jerk earlier, I have no other option. I grab my lab sheet and move quickly to his group. "Thanks," I say, sitting down across from him. I sketch the vials at Jack's group, then copy all of their data for each test result before returning to my pod. I get out my colored pencils because, as Ms. Phillips says, if you draw it, you must color it, and finish up the final details. I color one of the vials pink, another blue, and the last a dull gray. The nitrogen and potassium tests showed good levels with Jack's soil sample. But the soil lacked phosphorus, and so under the question, "What type of fertilizer does your soil need?" I write, "My soil needs a 0-46-0 mix." The last section asks for a justification for my recommendation. I hurriedly jot down a brief paragraph. The soil test measures nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The first digit represents nitrogen, the second phosphorus, and the last potassium. My results show this soil needs 0 nitrogen or potassium, but the 46 means the soil needs phosphorus. I hope this is good enough because I'm out of time. I jot my name at the top of the sheet just as the bell rings. I grab my book bag and bump right into Jack, who has walked over to my pod. "I'm sorry about what Chloe did," he says. "It wasn't your fault." "Hey, thanks for letting me join you guys. Otherwise, I'd have a 0 on this," I say, holding up the lab sheet. "Just got it done." "I know it wasn't my fault, but I saw Chloe do it," says Jack. "I should have told you then, and I'm sorry I didn't." Just when I thought he was all right after all. "So why are you telling me now?" I ask, perturbed. "Because I don't want you to think we're all jerks," says Jack. "You're a little late on that one. You didn't even tell me your real name yesterday," I say. "So yes, you all are jerks." I think that last part. I think it, but I don't say it. "So you could have fooled me." And with that, I execute the perfect storm out, dropping my lab sheet in the turn-in box as I glide from the room. I know it was childish, but I felt it was warranted. Don't let them get to you, I tell myself as I head to my locker. "Wait up, Grace," says Jack. He's walking quickly to where I'm already swapping my science textbook out for my math book. I grab my notebook and turn to face him. "What?" I ask impatiently. "Don't you think we should talk about our project?" asks Jack. I roll my eyes. "Yeah, it would have been great if we could have done that in class. Too bad you didn't have an empty seat at your table." "I'm sorry," says Jack. "I should have let you sit at my group. I should have told you what Chloe did. I'm really sorry." "You keep saying that and I'll have to enter you into the sorry contest. You'd win, by the way," I say. "Ouch," says Jack. "Give me a chance to start over?" "I'm pretty sure I gave you that chance yesterday." The warning bell rings and I slam my locker door shut. The wounded look in Jack's eyes makes me cave. A little. I sigh loudly. "What do you have in mind?" "Meet me after school at the beanery," says Jack, a hopeful expression on his face. "Do you know where it is?" Do I know where the only coffee shop on a 4-mile-wide island is?" I ask, immediately regretting my sarcasm. While I had many more choices for coffee shops than Columbia, I also had a lot more choices for friendship, and Jack does seem to be trying. I start again, this time using a more civil tone. "Yes, I know where the beanery is." "Great," says Jack. "See you there right after school." He walks away before I have a chance to respond, which is something I think he did on purpose. I head to math class, feeling a little lighter in spite of myself. Bonus points for sliding into my seat just as the final bell rings. The rest of the day moves slowly. Seriously, if time moved any slower, it would be going backwards. And that is something I have considered. It's an idea that first came to me when I was in the 5th grade, bored out of my skull, sitting through a lecture on softball rules and regulations. It was a long and painful experience, trust me. My mind wandered, as it generally does whenever I'm bored. I fantasized about what I would do if I could go back in time. On that particular day, I would have gone back in time to when I got up that morning. I would have faked an illness, stayed at home, and skipped the mind-numbing softball lecture. On a day like today, well, I think I'll keep going forward, at least until I hear what Jack has to say after school. Bzzz. Finally. The 3:00 bell rings and I, like everyone else, file out of the building as calmly as possible. We're middle school students, so this means we leave the building in total chaos. Mims has 3 school buses for the kids who live more than 1 mile away. Everyone else walks home. And sometimes even bus riders walk if it's a nice day like today. Kids are racing around each other, laughing and shouting, celebrating what my mother calls an Indian summer day. Since Mims is located on the southern tip of Miller's Island, all roads and sidewalks lead to town. I get caught up in the excitement of our brief parole, following closely behind a group of classmates as we head downtown. That's when I notice Jack's nowhere to be found in the crowd. I slow my pace and wonder if he's setting me up. I question whether or not I'm up to being disappointed again. What's worse, being disappointed in public. I look behind me, search for Jack's face, and still can't find him. Another 10 minutes of walking, and I'm alone on the sidewalk. The beanery looms ahead of me like a hungry shark. I continue walking toward the danger, unable to pull away. What am I doing? Jack's not going to be there. It's just another trick. An autumn breeze blows through me, promising colder days to come. As I pull my sweater tighter, I step up my pace. Jack or no Jack, I decide to go into the beanery and get a hot chocolate, even if it's to go. When I arrive at the beanery, I hesitate momentarily, my hand resting on the brass handle of a forest green door. I take a deep breath and push the door open, unsure of what awaits me. It's amazing. The aroma of fresh roasted coffee beans mixed with straight from the oven cookies beckons me to the counter. "I'll take one, please," I say. "One of what?" asks a smiling girl who stands behind the counter. "Everything," I say, breathing in the fragrance of what is now my most favorite place on earth. "We get that a lot," says the girl. "Since I've known everyone on Miller's Island my whole life, I'm going to guess you're new here." I nod. "Welcome to the island. I'm Emma." She smiles again, giving me the first warm greeting I've had since I moved here. "Thanks, I'm Grace," I say. "How's the hot chocolate?" "You tell me. First cup's always on the house." Emma turns around and fills a white cup with hot chocolate, tops it with whipped cream, and adds curls of chocolate on top. "Cinnamon?" she asks. "Yes, please," I say, eager to have that cup in my hands. Emma puts the cup onto a delicate saucer, then slides it across the counter to me. "What brings you in?" "I'm meeting someone here." I look around the room and with a sinking feeling realize that once again, I'm the butt of a joke. "Who?" asks Emma in a helpful tone. "I'm sure I must know them." With a shock, I realize I don't remember Jack's real name. I don't want to look like a total moron in front of the first nice person I've met here, so I answer the only name I know. "Jack?" I say tentatively. "You must be early. The only person here is my brother." Emma nods to a table almost completely hidden from view behind a wire rack of ground coffee bags. Jack looks up and waves me over. That's when I notice they both have the same jade green eyes and wavy brown hair. "Boone Carter," says Emma. "Why didn't you tell Grace your real name? You're such a dork." "Nerd," says Jack, grinning at me. "Dorks are socially awkward. I'm a nerd." "You're both," says Emma, shaking her head. I smile and wonder why it makes me happy to see that he paid attention yesterday during my brief conversation with Chloe when I tried to educate her on the difference between a nerd and a geek. As I join Jack at his table, I notice his chair is more of a small pew, large enough for only 2 people, that seems to be bolted to the wall. "Sorry about that," I say. "I guess you'll always be Jack to me." "I've been called worse, probably even by you," says Jack. He laughs and removes his book bag from the only other chair at the table, dropping it to the floor. "So, what do you think?" "About Emma?" I ask, feigning ignorance. "I think she must have been adopted." I sit at the cozy table and set my book bag on the floor next to his. "Funny," says Jack. "What do you think about the beanery?" I take a sip of my hot chocolate, and just for a moment, I feel like I'm in heaven. "This is unbelievably good," I say, already deciding one cup will not be enough.
"I love this place," says Jack. "I come here every day after school to do my homework."
"And spy on me," says Emma, wiping down a nearby table.
"Who's spying now?" Jack challenges.
Emma rolls her eyes and heads back to the counter.
"Where'd you move here from?" asks Jack.
In between sips of what I believe is pure melted chocolate, I tell Jack about Columbia and pretty much about my whole life within 5 minutes.
"Did you have a place like the Beanery there?" he asks.
"Not exactly," I say. "Well, there are tons of coffee shops, but I never went to one unless my parents took me."
"Took you?"
asks Jack, as if it is unnatural for a 13-year-old girl to go anywhere with her parents. "Since I don't drive yet," I say evenly. Jack looks confused. While it wasn't often that I felt like taking the 15-mile hike after school to the closest coffee shop. Jack still doesn't get it. He looks at me like I'm speaking in tongues. "The bus," I say. "I rode the big yellow school bus along with everyone else at Columbia Middle School. We were far away from the city, so no, we didn't have a place like this to go to that was close to the school."
"You have my deepest sympathies,"
says Jack, raising his cup in a toast-like manner. I look around the room, taking it all in. Dark woven rugs nearly match the hardwood floors. Local artwork hangs from the walls, the names of the artist on a card below each painting. There are a dozen other tables like this one, but the rest are out in the open. I wonder if Jack's daily visits are under the condition that he sits here out of the way. 2 overstuffed armchairs anchor a small fireplace that's framed by 2 thin bookshelves. The shelves are narrow at the top. Each shelf expands in length going down to the last shelf that looks about 4 feet long. The shelves hold coffee cups, not books. The top shelves both hold just 1 cup. Each cup has someone's name neatly printed near the rim. I look down at the table and see Jack's cup with the name Boone. Jack taps the cup.
"Yeah, all of us regulars have our own cups. I don't know how I'd get through school if I didn't have this place to come to after. So I hope by inviting you to a locals-only place, you'll see that I'm not such a jerk after all."
"That remains to be seen," I say. I take another sip. But I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. The next hour passes quickly as Jack and I talk about all things nerdy. Feeling at ease, I even divulge my idea about going back in time to see how it might affect the future.
"I know, right?"
asks Jack. I take a sip, quietly judging his sincerity. I hope I don't regret this conversation when we're back at school tomorrow. I decide to let him take the lead in this. I take another sip and wait patiently, wondering where he's headed.
"You're talking about retrocausality, right?"
Jack prompts. At this, I return my cup to my saucer before I drop it. I cannot believe I've stumbled upon another person on this infinitesimal island who knows about retrocausality, which, by the way, happens to be one of my favorite thought experiments. Double nerd. I love science and I love thinking about scientific theories. So here's the deal, very loosely defined. Retrocausality is the idea that an effect could happen before it's caused. I've always been intrigued by this hypothesis and have developed my own thought experiments about it. For example, when Aubrey and I had plotted ways for me to let Mason know how I felt about him, I wished I could have moved the effect, his expressing an interest in me, to happening after the cause, my telling him my feelings. That way, I'd know how Mason felt without having to risk major embarrassment on my part. In another experiment, I imagined removing a cause entirely. For example, I'm probably one of the last kids in the country who had to have their tonsils removed. My throat burned like fire after, and while eating nothing but ice cream sounds like fun, in truth, I was fed up with it by the time I was better. If retrocausality were possible, I would have eliminated the recovery part of that whole ordeal. Or maybe even eliminated the surgery. In either event, would the effect still have happened? Would my tonsils have healed without the painful recovery? Would they have just vanished without the surgery? Could I take out entire events or causes and still have the effect? The notion of retrocausality still fascinates me, but looking across the table at Jack, I can't fathom why I would have ever tested the theory out on Mason Sanders. I feel a strange thrill and connection to Jack. I stare at him, doing a poor job of masking my surprise that he knows about retrocausality, that he can even pronounce retrocausality.
Well, gosh, he says in a fake country accent. We got them there intertubes a few years back. Of course, no one ever went near 'em until we had 'em checked out real good.
He grins.
'Cause, we had to find out how many of us'ns could get on that there interweb at the same time.
Okay, I say, rolling my eyes. Jack laughs.
So, I'll ask again. Do you mean retrocausality?
No, I say. Well, not in the traditional sense.
Traditional?
Jack grins.
Spoken like a super nerd.
Anyway, I say, sighing, my idea involves more than particles traveling back to a point in time to change the future. My theory is... I hesitate, still unsure if I can trust him. But the knowledge that no one else would understand this conversation makes me feel that I could brush it off if this does turn out to be another joke at my expense. My theory is that I could go back in time, not just particles. I could go back and make a decision about something that had already happened in the future, but my decision wouldn't change anyone else's future, just my own.
Interesting idea,
says Jack. He leans forward, and I believe he's actually taking me seriously.
So, if somehow you could go forward in time, and you already knew about today, what would you change?
I feel my face blush, but quickly recover. I'd have ordered a large instead of a small, I say, pointing at my empty cup.